Welcome back to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. In these episodes, I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. This is a very special episode of Behind the Build. I have with me today Mr. Paul O'Brien. Paul, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Morning, everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. Hi. Honored to be here. I have worked in startup ecosystems in the startup economy for 25, 30 years. And I'm very passionate about a notion that startups, by and large, for the last 30 years have actually consistently failed at the same rate, at a rate of about 90%. And we say that as though it's encouraging of founders, like, don't worry about it. Most startups fail. It's not a big deal. This is the way it is. And yet nobody ever started to ask, despite having accelerators and government programs and workforce development programs for entrepreneurs, why is the rate of failure the same? Shouldn't it be better? And so I do that kind of work. I'm very passionate about trying to change that number. And so I do a lot of work in public policy. I do a lot of work in education, publishing quite a bit. I do a lot of research about the workforce and job training and putting together teams. And I'm just desperately passionate about the idea that we shouldn't have so many startups and founders fail along the way.
I made sure that my wife only learned about that after.
By the way, this is not likely to work out.
So I want to talk about the book. I want to talk about Startup Economist. I want to talk a little bit about Mustard Hub. I want to talk a little bit about everything. Yeah. But I think that let's kind of start a little bit at the beginning. You spent decades doing this. I want everybody to know a little bit about what the Startup Economist is, right? So for somebody meeting you for the first time, what does the title even mean, and how did you get started with that in particular?
I started my career at Yahoo in Silicon Valley, and to make the long story short, I've been in Austin, Texas for about 16, 17 years. And so for those of you that are familiar with all of the news and the hype about startups, that means I've been in two of the most prominent regions of the world for startups and entrepreneurship throughout my career. Most of my background is in marketing and storytelling, social media even. And over the years, we've experienced a lot of changes in the way we do business, by which I mean the launch of the internet, by and large, taught a lot of businesses that marketing actually just means lead gen and doing SEO and maybe running Google ads or some such, Facebook ads. And that's not correct. If you go back before the internet into the 70s and 80s and 90s, of course, marketing meant figuring out who the competition is and where you should put your business and putting together advertisements, but actually understanding what should go in those advertisements so that they would work better. It was doing the research to figure out whether or not starting a business was even a good idea. Well, the internet came along, and as the idea of marketing changed in people's minds, I think most businesses, certainly companies as well, and to a great extent startups, lost sight of the fact that that's the intention of it, that's what it meant. You saw startups emerging. We see startups emerging. We see small businesses today that are just fixated on only getting customers and yet still struggling because you can't only get customers. You've got to figure out how to compete in the market and what it's going to cost. I have a bit of an economics background. And so over the years of trying to remind people how to do marketing and what it means, it occurred to me that we have a similar problem with cities and regions of the world, that the cities are very good at saying, hey, come to Dallas, move to St. Louis, and attracting companies and trying to create jobs in their ecosystem. But they're actually suffering from the same problem, that they don't know, truly. They don't know how to do marketing well. They're throwing up ads on Facebook. They're putting out a press release as though a press release is relevant anymore. They're not creating content. And it struck me that there might be something to changing the idea from marketing to more economics. Right? There's an economic impact. It's not about customers or sales or growth. It's actually a question of whether or not we want to have a successful venture, a successful outcome. And that's an economics question, or at least I think people appreciate that it's an economics question. It's about the economy. It's about the ROI on our investments and the impact of what we're building and doing.
I'm curious how you feel. There's a couple of things that I want to just double click into that a little bit. I think for a really long time, the idea of marketing and advertising became conflated, right? It was always grouped together. And I think that a lot of folks, started to operate from this standpoint that they were almost the same thing. And I think what got lost in marketing is the idea of market development, which is generally that first piece of marketing, understanding who your customer is and why they're even your customer. Yeah. And you talked about the internet. And what I think is interesting, what happened, late 90s, early 2000s, when people saw that their direct line to their end customer all of a sudden shrank. They could immediately touch their customers without going through any sort of traditional mechanisms. And so then sort of was born this idea of digital marketing.
Why would we not do that? Let's do that.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
And without really realizing that it's still marketing, and so separating this idea of digital marketing from traditional marketing or marketing and advertising, I think that it became, in my mind, right, is this confusion when the reality is that traditionally things have not changed in a sense that the market development is still required no matter what channel or medium you're using, where you're doing it, right? Marketing is marketing, whether it's digital, print, right. What have you.
Right. The first, that's exactly right. Nothing has changed. Literally nothing has changed. The first question that marketing asks is, where is our customer? How do we influence them? That's it. And out of that comes all of the different channels or places that you might find someone. It also comes certainly the messaging, but then what also comes from that should be the direction as to what to do as a business. Right? Do we offer A or B? Do we price C or D? And you're right. I think people have lost sight of the fact that that question is equally important of, should we be on radio or that billboard on the freeway or Facebook ads?
Right.
And yes, the internet came along and everybody raced at, well, obviously we should just do the internet stuff. It tracks better. You can do performance based, so we're not spending money at a risk. The thought I'd add to that, and this isn't as true. It isn't as true today, but it might be valuable for everybody to have this perspective about. You're right, the 90s and 2000s. What happened is, appreciate there were a lot of people like me in 1998, 99, working at places like Yahoo, and I was 22 years old. And as we moved on from those careers on the inside of the internet and took on roles in marketing in companies, it became apparent very, very quickly that the VP of marketing, the CMO, the board at the company had no idea what we were doing, no grasp of it at all. Right. They were used to the agency, right, and we're going to run print ads and so forth. And so that's where digital marketing emerged. Suddenly this 20-year-old kid shows up and frankly ran circles around them because we're spending billions of dollars and delivering massive returns that they don't even understand. They couldn't even sit in a board meeting and explain what we were doing, which was an incredible experience. I'm sitting with, executives and investors at 23 years old, teaching them what search is, because they don't get it, and so what happened to a great extent was it split, right? It became digital marketing, and we're just getting back to the fact that actually it's not digital marketing; it's just marketing,
right?
And whether you do it online or off, it's the same set of questions.
So I want to talk about the book. You just put it into print a little while ago. Quickly. Sprung up to the top on Amazon. And you've said that you wrote the book that you needed to read 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So give me the core idea that you wanted on paper, and who did you write it for?
Well, like I shared, I grew up in Michigan when the economy was rough, and then obviously I ended up in Silicon Valley when the opposite was true. And then I came to Austin as it was transitioning from one experience to what it is now. And those experiences truly shape who I am and how I think. That we shouldn't have in our economy, in companies, in our workforce, in universities, we shouldn't have experiences like Michigan where things aren't going very well. Because we know what to do. We just talked about some of it.
Yeah.
All of it's not marketing, but we just talked about some of it that helps answer that. And obviously we can't recreate Silicon Valley throughout the world. It's got certain characteristics that work really well for some of the things they do. And so as I ended up in Austin, I saw those two worlds kind of coming together, that there were things that just weren't working and don't work very well here in Texas. And then there were things that do or can or should. And so the reason I say it was something I wish I read 20 years ago is I've spent my career trying to figure out how to end up where I ended up today, not realizing 20 years ago that that's what I should be doing. There wasn't anybody when we went to college. There wasn't anybody 20 years ago who said, you know what, there should be more people in public policy that understand entrepreneurship. It didn't exist.
No.
There weren't even people in venture capital that said, hey, we should understand how the government matters.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. And so all of these challenges that we have with companies trying to be innovative, with cities trying to be supportive of entrepreneurship, as we transition the workforce, which I'd love to get involved with talking about, as we transition the workforce, just because now AI is coming along. Is it going to destroy jobs? Actually not. It's probably going to create a ton of jobs, but it's going to displace jobs. It's going to change a lot of jobs for sure. We now can say, look, we need a lot of people who understand that stuff. We need a lot of people who help the government, who help companies understand how to go through these transitions. And this book is about that. I've had people ask me if it's a book about how to do startups. It's actually not. It's a book about the ecosystems. It's a book about how to create the culture and the dynamics of an ecosystem, whether it's a company or a city or a country, that is better suited to whatever is appropriate of entrepreneurs and startups in that part of the world.
A recurring theme, right, or line in your work is that these ecosystems don't happen at the city level, right? They happen at the regional,
for sure,
level.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, why does that distinction even matter so much, and how do where do they get it wrong?
Yeah, it's actually a wonderfully critical distinction in the sense that if you think about you think about the sector Mustard's hub is in HR, if we were to put it broadly, right? HR, whether it's innovation in HR tech or platforms, or it's recruiting companies and staffing firms, or it's the HR people at companies, hiring managers at companies, right? That's all a sector of the economy. That's all a sector in some context that matters. And so if you were to start your business, say you're in HR, you were to start your business and you're in, I don't know, pick a place. You're in Bentonville, Arkansas. You're going to start your business in Bentonville. And your mindset is, we're only going to focus on Bentonville. We're only interested in what's going on right here. That's it. Mm-hmm. You are hopefully, obviously, you're absolutely blind to competition, which is very aggressively everywhere else. Mm-hmm. You're blind to opportunities, many of which could be better. You're blind to potential partnerships, which certainly could be stronger. And now that's not to say, obviously, there's a region for HR. I think it's just a neat way to appreciate that the mistake a lot of cities make is the opposite. They think, actually, it is all about right here.
So it's like running a race with blinders on.
Yeah, well, it's we're here. I'm here in Austin, Texas. You're here in Austin, Texas. It's blinders in the sense that the city of Austin just topped 1 million people, but the metropolitan region of Austin is now 1.6. And a place like Cedar Park, which is right around the corner from us, just saw massive investments from the aerospace industry.
Hmm.
So let's talk about aerospace for a second. If you're in aerospace, does that mean you go to Austin because it's cool and everybody says you should be in Austin?
Yeah.
that's the startup ecosystem, or that's the ecosystem? Well, no, actually, it's in Cedar Park. And the mistake that's being made is people will say it's Austin, or people will say it's just Cedar Park. No, in fact, it's a region relevant to whatever sector it is that you're working with. In that case, aerospace. That I'll add this point to wrap the thought that what's also interesting when you look at comparisons of startup ecosystems, the data, research about where venture capital is. Notice they'll always say like Miami versus Silicon Valley. Well, Silicon Valley's 4 major cities. It's a region. It's not even San Francisco. It's San Francisco plus a bunch of other places. And so just the way we talk about sectors, the way we talk about regions, the way we talk about policy, the way we talk about venture capital is broken, because we'll compare a small town to a region of California. They're not even comparable. We're not even comparing the same thing. And that sets us up to fail, because we then aren't doing a proper assessment of what's going on.
So it's no secret that you and I have known each other for a little while, right? You're with us here at Mustard Hub on our leadership team.
Yeah, we've had some fun.
A lot of your recent writing has really turned towards workforce and the future of work. And I'm curious what kind of pulled you into that direction. Like what brings an ecosystems and a venture guy into thinking really hard about the future of work and what our workforce looks like and the challenges it faces?
Let me give you 3 things.
Besides a good friend who pulled you in that direction.
Let me give you 3 things to consider. Thing number 1 is that there are certain sectors of our economy that are horizontals more than verticals. By which I mean they're dependencies on absolutely everything about the future. One of those is energy, for example. Energy is, we have to do something about it. We have to invest in it. We all use it every day for everything. And so we could talk about energy as a horizontal sector, or we can the sector in a vertical, or we can realize that no, actually, it kind of affects everything in the economy. Obviously, the workforce is one of those, right? Whether it's how high school education works, or what we do in universities, or job training, trade schools, or it's how HR and HR tech works, or it's regulatory policy about how do we handle employment? How do we handle health insurance? Right. This is something that affects absolutely everything. Number 1, and from that lens, number 2 for me is I come from the startup world. I come from a very innovative slice of our economy that is disruptive, and by design. I mean, that's kind of the point. We're inventing new things to improve upon and replace the old. What gets most affected by that are jobs. We're talking about it in the context of artificial intelligence today, but we went through the same concerns and issues when social media became big.
Yeah.
What do we do about all these employees on social media now?
Yeah.
Right. Same thing happened with the internet. What do we do with the internet?
Exactly,
right. Oh my God.
And then computers before
that. Right. So 2 things are a critical path. And then the third thing I'll leave you with is actually just, that personal passion I have for it. That, when I think about my point about 90% of startups failing and being disappointed about that, or seeing cities and states throughout the country or throughout the world that are struggling, and we know better. We know how to fix that. I get the same feeling when I think about companies and layoffs, and perhaps going through these massive cycles because they staff up way too much, thinking they need the people, or they're going to have the demand, and then they turn around and they have to lay off a ton of people, and that disappoints me. That's like a startup curve. We're launching a bunch of stuff and it's all going to fail, and it seems like we can streamline that a lot more effectively, so that in my personal experience, it's that founders should not fail as much. But when I apply that same theory, that same thesis to society, all we're really saying is people should not struggle as much in the work that they do. It shouldn't be so hard to thrive and be in the right job and be happy in it,
Yeah.
and not have to worry about it turning on you in 6 months or a year because things aren't working out.
You write in your book about, and you've even written some articles recently about this idea that cities don't have a talent problem. They have this optionality
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
And so unpack that for me a little bit. What is the difference? And why does a business owner who's trying to, who's trying to hire and keep people care about that?
Yeah, that's a great topic. That's actually very much a perfect example of why I'm passionate about what you all are doing, what Mustard Hub is doing, and workforce issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that, in my work, I come up through cities, I come up through public policy organizations, and we're constantly talking about workforce development. And workforce development traditionally, and even frankly, generally means to cities job training, right? So the community college, the university, the high school curriculum and programming, and making sure that people are prepared for jobs. Number one, and then number two, it means what? It means attracting employers. For the most part, it actually doesn't even mean really helping start businesses. It means trying to get a company here, which is why you see so much effort to, bring Amazon to your city, bring some major employer to the city. Because the way a government organization sees it is workforce business development is difficult. But if we can get Google to open an office here, that's 10,000 jobs.
Yeah.
And it's going to look wonderful for us,
right?
We just brought 10,000. We have 10,000 jobs, and it struck me as kind of amusing to then appreciate that actually that's not even job creation. That's just job transfer, right? What you're doing is you're moving those jobs from somewhere else to your city.
Right. It's a badge that some city official can wear, right? But you haven't necessarily built something from nothing. You just displaced it from somewhere else.
Yep. And it doesn't mean we can't also create jobs. It's just not very easy for a city or a government to create jobs. It's not the work that they do. You have to create the circumstances, the book, hence the book. You got to create the circumstances that enable people to start things that create jobs. So what's optionality? Well, optionality is a very new idea that I cover heavily in the book. It's a new idea only in the sense that a lot of us have talked about it generically, like we're aware of it, we know it's a thing, but it was never named. And what it means is that whether or not you have a healthy job economy in your region of the world actually depends on not whether or not I have a job, but whether or not I can easily go get 2 or 3 different jobs doing something applicable. Optionality, I have options.
Right.
And so it applies in 2 meaningful ways, right? Yes, if you are a business, if you are a company and you're trying to employ people, appreciate that a primary decision that people make when they move to work for you or they take your job, it is in fact, what am I going to do if I get laid off? It is, right? If I'm going to move, I got to know that I'm going to be in a safe place where I can do something else. And how that applied to my past and my world is that we discovered the same thing is true of entrepreneurship. That cities, the reason people don't start businesses, or the reason people don't start startups, entrepreneurs don't start startups, is in fact primarily about optionality, not capital. And it's because most businesses do fail. Most startups definitely fail, which means what? In order for people in your community to try to start something, I have to know that I'm going to be able to safely fall back on something else.
Yeah, where's that safety net? How can I re-enter successfully into that workforce?
Yep, optionality. Okay. Now, here's the trick to it. It actually is easy to develop an ecosystem in this direction. The mistake that cities continue to make is they just chase the big tech company or they chase a big employer as though having jobs is what creates optionality. And that's actually not correct. A person can work in a certain place, right? A certain sector. Let's pick a different sector. Say I work in the music business. If you attract Google to the city, that doesn't create optionality for me, right? I work in the music business. Even if I work in music tech, I'm not going to go to Google next, right? I actually work in the music business,
Sure.
right? So optionality is a simple matter of a city understanding their sector strengths and focusing on those, attract those kind of companies, support those kind of businesses. And businesses and companies, employers, you can do the same thing, right? It's figuring out how to establish yourself in your ecosystem amongst the things that are loosely similar so that you create a community, you create an ecosystem where certainly you might be competing with each other, but you're also collaborating because you're doing some similar things. And it enables you to draw talent into the ecosystem, into the community, because people want to work in that sector. And if you're celebrating the fact that you're a part of that community, you have jobs in that sector, and there are other opportunities in that sector there, it gets a lot easier to hire people. By the way, too, it gets a lot easier to raise capital because capital thinks the same way.
Yeah.
Capital wants to go where there's options, where there's experience and strength from people.
Had a really, really interesting fireside chat recently with Steve Glenn, a community builder out of Milwaukee, who I know that you know.
Yeah, we just covered it.
We touched on this, a similar idea, but a little bit more of a tangentially related in that the business owners and the startup founders, who take that risk, who take that chance, who spend that time, often find it difficult to re-enter the workforce for also another reason, right? The fact that their skills mapping to any particular job, right, isn't necessarily a one-to-one, right? Somebody who's worked for themselves or somebody who's been a startup founder, has to defend against that stigma, right?
I see. Yeah.
Of a business that maybe didn't succeed.
Right.
But also, there's a notion that I think that the business owners or really a startup founder over time becomes unhireable, and frankly, and I pointed this out to him, I'm a good example of that myself. I've been a serial entrepreneur for 25 years. I started my first company 25 years ago. I built it up. I built a roll-up portfolio. I had another startup. I've actually, in my adult life, post college, my education background is in music. Clever choice there for your example.
Cheers.
But my background was in music, right? Not the first thing people think of when they're when they're listing their job requirements. I've gone and I've started businesses, but I've never had that employer who can speak for me. So I have a resume of things that I've done. At the same time, I don't have that employer who can speak to my skills, and I've never been integrated into corporate America in the traditional way. So there's this notion that a lot of folks in my shoes then all of a sudden become unhireable for a lot of reasons, right? We touched on that a lot, and I felt like it was a fascinating conversation. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think we live in a wonderful era of innovation about employment, because this couldn't have happened 20 years ago. What I mean by living in the wonderful era is we can do this now. That we've learned that I think part of the problem is we've made the mistake of people building careers based on job titles, based on job roles.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to move up. You're supposed to move to the next one. And it's a mistake because that's actually not a decent representation of what a person is capable of. And I use the word capable carefully because you correctly, I think, use the word skills. Well, skills are trainable. I can learn new skills. It's not a question of skills. It's not that I was a VP of marketing and therefore I could be a VP of marketing anywhere, because that's not true, right? I'm a certain kind of marketing person.
Right.
You might be a certain kind of product person,
sure,
right? And you can't just pick up and go wherever else. And so because of that past,
mm-hmm.
I think you're right. Because of that past, unfortunately, we build resumes, we build job roles, we have jobs with employers that are structured that way.
They are.
I have this role. I'm learning these skills. I do these skills. That's it.
Or I came up through this way, and these are these responsibilities that I owned through these organizations.
For sure. And therefore what happens, I've had the same startup experience, but we can apply this to people in general, right? What happens then when those people are let go? What happens when the startup fails? Well, I'm in this box then of that's my skill, that's what I do, and that's it. And now you have a stigma that says, and it didn't work out very well.
Exactly.
But the thing is, that's maybe it didn't work out very well because the business was junk.
Yeah.
Right? It has nothing to do with the person. And so my point that we're in a really exciting time to figure this out is, one, we've learned that that's all wrong. We learned that we've been doing it wrong. But instead it's that we've also learned personality types are psychology is a massive factor to appreciate and consider. Age, it frankly is a factor, right?
Yeah.
When somebody's quite a bit older, they're certainly capable of a different variety of things. But then also it's more so like understanding the kind of work they're doing and the impact that they had on the work, not whether or not they were capable with the skill or it was good or bad, right? But the impact. Were they a valuable contributor? Was it effective? Was the employer thrilled with their work? Right? These signals are signals that we can get at now that correlate with, again, psychology. Does a person have grit?
Right.
And tenacity and perseverance? That's a wonderful asset.
Yeah.
And it's not the same as or is the person highly risk tolerant and they like to try a bunch of different things and mess around, right? That's a wonderful skill set or skill set. That's a wonderful trait. But they're two different kinds of people, right? And someone may or may not work out in a job because of which type of person they are. Right. And yet that type of person may be perfectly appropriate for a completely different job. Historically, we've not looked at that at all. That's been the problem.
And
now we can't.
That was part of that conversation where the really mapping that individual into the next role becomes an incredibly difficult. It's a difficult concept because there's no easy way to do it. Like so, there's no easy visibility, right, into where might that person be uber successful, because a lot of those soft skills that you're talking about, right, they don't make it into a resume, or there isn't, in my particular case, there isn't an employer who's going to go and comment on those things to my next opportunity.
Yeah. I can't help but wonder, and maybe I'm curious what you think for changing our conversation. I can't help but wonder if perhaps the recruiting and hiring and the placement firms, I can't help but wonder if we can't challenge them to figure out how to solve this more meaningfully. Because, as an example of what we're talking about, I'll still get a ton of emails from recruiters or LinkedIn messages from recruiters saying, "Hey, we got this perfect VP of marketing job, and here's what it pays, and here's where it is." And and I'll read it, and it's in the finance sector. It's in banking, right? Okay. And I look at that and I think, you're just fishing, right? What about me, in any way whatsoever, says I'm appropriate to a marketing job in finance, right? That now I'm not saying it's their fault, right? I'm pointing out. I wonder if that sector is where some more innovation, some more data, some more intelligence would be incredible to see if the people who are trying to place people can't figure out how to do so better than the way it's been done.
Yeah, and I would argue it can. I would actually argue that it can. I mean, there are so many like incredibly good and powerful assessments that can be taken, for example, just as an example, right? To tell you a little bit about whether it's your personality, whether it's your work type, whether it's skill finders, Colby, personality tests, all of these things measure people's skills, right, and aptitude in a different way. The problem is, the way that I see it, is that all of this information is fragmented. And even whoever created these tests doesn't even have a database of everything. And so it becomes nearly impossible, right, for an individual to sort of sort of own their own profile, right? You go and apply for
Sure.
jobs, and there's profiling that happens, right? And the organization doing it then owns these records and then going to determine whether or not you're a good fit.
And they sit there.
And they sit there.
They stay there.
That's exactly right. They stay there, right? You go to the next place, they do the exact same thing. You go to the next place, they do the exact same thing. And then I get hired somewhere, I work for a little while. Maybe I leave that place and I'm ready to do it all over again.
The same outdated, antiquated process.
And so there's no
fill out this resume.
Exactly.
Or send us your resume so it can go in the database.
So it starts all over again. You have your resume, you have your experience, and then that place that you apply at is going to have their process with their tests that they like to take, so that they own that data that you do. And so you end up losing this ability to own your profile, and for others to sort of access it in some way. I don't know. We might have just created a really incredible startup idea here for somebody to go nail.
I mean, right? Your resume is portable. It seems very logical to me, right? Your resume is portable. There's a lot of talk in government about the fact that a lot more about people needs to be portable, right? Yeah. We see that in healthcare. How do we make your healthcare records private and frankly portable? Because why do I have to start over with a doctor? It's the same notion. Yeah. We just need something better than a resume that gives us insight to who people are.
That's right.
And then arguably you want something on so you want those larger data sets. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know, maybe the recruiting or the workforce sector of the economy can figure it out, that you then want the data set on the back end to validate that it works, right? That these people are actually better fits and stuck around longer, or we're better employees, or what have you. That's the startup, right? To me, that are we struggling in the workforce because people are unskilled, or are we struggling in the workforce because we're putting people in the wrong jobs based on what they're actually ideal for? I would argue it's in fact the latter. It's not underskilled. It's not lack of job training. Obviously, our high schools and universities are doing well enough that they can get people into the workforce meaningfully.
Right.
I think it's that we're mismatching people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if we stay here long enough, I'm sure we could probably solve all the workforce problems. But let's talk about the future of work. There's a lot of things changing for businesses that employ people, right? And beyond the things that are just headlines. You even mentioned one right now, right? This idea of portability, right? Benefits portability. And we can touch on that in a second. But I'm curious where you see leaders most misreading their people right now, right? What are they getting wrong about what's happening inside their workforce, right? How are things changing so much with technology, with policy, right? And how is that impacting the future of work, right? I know it's a big theme that we like to talk about are people problems. So, I mean, this seems particularly relevant to sort of discuss right now. But a lot of those people problems are really just visibility problems, arguably.
Yeah, they're visibility problems for sure. I don't even think arguably. Sure they are, right? A company is layers.
Right. And they can't fix what they can't see.
And they're going to be layers, right? But they've tried to, right? They've tried to flatten companies. And so you're right. It's still a visibility issue. But I wonder if it's not a visibility issue in the sense of asking, like we were just talking about, asking the wrong questions. You know, does my employee look happy? Are they getting the job done? Great. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
We'll talk to them again in 6 months and then the annual review. You know, it's that we lack visibility into what that fit and what that relationship actually looks like. But is that my answer to your question? You know, I think another substantial challenge in the workforce is actually just a question of the fact that people have different expectations of, and I'm going to use this word, which I know means something in HR in particular, but I mean it in a much broader context. and that's compensation. That people actually have very different needs and expectations of compensation. Um, someone might need a lot of salary. Someone else, and we see this a lot. This is what drives startups. Someone else might actually just need healthcare.
And it also might be generational, right? I mean, the 20-year-old entering the workforce could need something different from the 40-year-old with two kids
Exactly.
versus the 65-year-old who's about to retire.
Exactly that, right?
And yet benefits packages are typically a one-size-fits-all thing. Here's your health insurance. Pick one of these three options. Here's your retirement. Here's your whatever.
All right. So if I can, let's talk about healthcare or health insurance just for 1 second, because it's a bee in my bonnet or whatever you want to call it. My family works in healthcare. I'm the odd one out. And in the United States, as we had all this transition to universal care or more Medicare, broadly applicable Medicare, what bothers a lot of us who work in regulation and policy and are familiar with healthcare, what bothers us is in fact that what's being considered and what's being done actually has nothing to do with why it works and why it even exists. And so what's put forth are proposals and ideas to fix healthcare and health insurance based on what sounds good to the public.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference between between good policy, right, and politics.
Right, exactly. And yet it doesn't even recognize why it's the way it's that way today. Most people don't know this. The U.S. healthcare system was developed post World War II as a way to ensure that companies could employ people without having to pay them more, as a lot of men came back into the workforce and a lot of women transitioned out. It was a way to ensure that the economy would keep humming along by the government saying, here's what we're going to do, companies, employers, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put together this thing called health insurance, and we're going to enable you to massively deduct the cost of the health insurance so that you can give it to employees. You can give health insurance to employees so that they can have healthcare. It was effectively a benefit, and we call it a benefit, but it was actually done for the purpose of ensuring that companies have a reason to employ people more meaningfully without having to pay for them. Companies don't want that to go away. Call it universal insurance, call it universal care, call it ACA, Affordable Care Act, call it Medicaid, doesn't matter. Companies don't want that to go away. It's a tax incentive benefit to hire people. Of course, they want to keep it exactly the way it is. Until that changes, we can't break much of anything. Why? Because the insurance industry also wants to keep it that way. Right. We have money coming through insurance in order to give people healthcare. So back to my point, or our discussion of what does compensation means. Well, we're not appreciating the fact that people actually have very different healthcare needs too. And maybe I have cancer, and I don't need or want to tell my employer about that, but I do actually have substantial healthcare needs. And therefore, exceptional healthcare coverage is a lot more meaningful to me than a salary.
Right.
A lot, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it ties kind of nicely what you're saying about visibility, but I think what the biggest problem is in the future of work is my lens on things, right? It's that our regulatory environment is generally broken. Our compliance considerations or compliance requirements are often odd and unnecessary, and they're in place for reasons that don't actually really need to exist. Back to healthcare, for example, we talk about healthcare privacy ad nauseum as though it's this massive security and compliance issue. When you ask the average person on the street, they don't care about whether or not their healthcare records get out in public.
Right.
Nobody cares. Like, yeah, I've got sick stuff. I've got issues. So do you. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of regulations we put in place. And I can't help but wonder if your point about visibility into the actual workforce needs ties very nicely to, okay, what macroeconomically, what politically do we fix based on what people are actually saying matters? And I think we could.
We could. I think, and then you run into sort of this next. I guess the next stage in the problem is, okay, if there's consensus that something needs to change, there's no mechanism in place to actually facilitate this in a way that wouldn't instantly break every system out there, right?
Right.
How
Right.
how does the infrastructure then need to change in order to support that?
So I'm going to give you a public affairs perspective to just give us something interesting to talk about, and why people like me do that work. Perhaps you've all noticed in government and politics, everyone's always proposing solutions. I've got the answer. And when
That's what gets people elected.
it's what gets you. That's why I'm pointing it out. It's what gets you elected. And conveniently, coincidentally, when it doesn't work out, what do people get to do? They get to say the opposition prevented it.
Yeah.
They get to say voters didn't approve the bond.
Right.
They get to say, well, we have some consultants who decided we should go a different direction, right? So I put forth the solution as a politician, and when it doesn't work out, it's not my fault.
It's everybody else.
It's everybody else's fault. And it's very important to appreciate that the reason that happens is people like hearing solutions. They don't like hearing what doesn't work, because that causes disagreement. And the reason it matters is actually what you just touched on, is something like infrastructure. How do we change things? How do we solve things? When you work in public policy, or you just work in government relations, what we actually do is we flip those narratives a lot, right? And what I mean by flip the narratives is we create for government, we create at the government or at the politicians, we create a risk. Mm-hmm. We create a threat, right? If you don't fix this, here's what's going to happen. If you don't move this forward, here's what's going to happen. Because we've learned that the public may not care about those risks. I don't care if healthcare is too expensive. I have insurance.
Right.
So you can see how we can't fix healthcare.
Yeah.
But instead, if we can get at the policymaker to say, here's what's going to happen if we don't fix healthcare. Here's what's going to happen if you don't follow through on these campaign promises. It's not good.
Yeah.
Then you put the people in place who make the decisions in a position where they'll actually make some changes. So it's similar in this regard. Let's talk about infrastructure for a second, right?
Yeah.
Infrastructure. So I've written about infrastructure. I wrote about infrastructure on Mustard Hub, so that's something we could share. But a lot of people have talked about it too. Most of us think about infrastructure as like roads and utilities, and it's kind of important to start with that appreciation, because you get my analogy that why won't your city build roads? Why won't your city put more roads in place?
Right. It helps facilitate transportation. It helps do all of that.
Right. It all sounds good, right? And the policymaker, the mayor is saying we're gonna fix transportation. We're gonna put more stuff in. We're gonna put rail in. Right. They're all positive, supportive kind of things. And people by and large want the solution, and then they argue about how bad things are. Traffic really sucks.
Yeah.
I want the solution.
Yeah.
But nobody's actually genuinely talking about a real problem that emerges. You see what I mean? That they sell the promise of the fix, but nothing actually ever gets done meaningfully on the infrastructure, because then along comes the $100 million bond, and voters are like, I
don't want to pay for it.
I don't need that. Right. And my roads are fine. I don't need that, right? And so we're not actually addressing these challenges in the appropriate way. And the appropriate way is, in fact, what? Well, when it comes to roads and infrastructure, interestingly, there's a very meaningful workforce development consideration. And that workforce development consideration is similar to what we talked about with optionality. It's literally mobility. Yeah. And it's that if I live on the west side of town, well, that limits where I can work. That's it. And if you're developing a lot of jobs, or the new employer opens up on the east side of town, I can't help that. I can't get a job there. I can't work there. The company over there can't employ people on the west side. Why? Because we're just not going to go over there. There's a cost involved in mobility. So we create this pain point for the politician. We create this pain point for the lawmaker that says it's not about your proposed solution. It's about the fact that if you don't fix this, your workforce is going to struggle, that your city is going to become more unaffordable. Right? An urban center of a city actually becomes unaffordable because there's no mobility. Right. If people can't get in and out, that becomes a very popular place to be, which makes it expensive. right? That's what happens. So in workforce development, similar notion. In innovation, similar notion. Can we elevate the idea of what infrastructure is, right? Can we elevate the idea of what infrastructure is? That infrastructure is also, in fact, a CRM, a customer relationship management platform. That's actually infrastructure, right? In the sense that if you have a company, you have a business, well, your business isn't in the business of CRMing, right? But you need this infrastructure to do the business better.
That's right.
Right? Just like you need roads.
The most valuable companies aren't necessarily building the one thing for those individuals, but rather the grounds upon which those companies can stand on and can be built on and
Perfectly. Eloquently.
can operate on.
Yep.
They're typically behind the scenes, right? It's the same. And using the analogy of the roads and utilities, I'm not building a pathway for John Smith, who lives on the west side, to get to the east side. I'm building a system of roads and bridges and utilities so that the community has mobility between those places,
to wherever,
right? And that all the companies who run the ride sharing, right, or who sell cars that need to be driven on a road, right, all can use those things, right, and all can utilize it sort of in the greater community. And I think that there's a straight line comparison, I think, to software.
There's a straight line comparison to software, perhaps in the sense of, here's an example, keeping the thread together in our conversation, in the thread of how do we actually fix healthcare in employers and in companies. Well, it's that idea of maybe portability of your resume, portability of your profile. Why don't people have portable insurance or heck with insurance, portable healthcare, right? Where I may be at an employer, why can't I go get a job somewhere else and just maintain everything that I need to provide for myself and care for myself? That's an infrastructure challenge. It's an infrastructure opportunity. And notice the mistake that we're making in society is saying we're going to provide these solutions to fix that problem. No, what we should be doing is saying, hang on a second. This is a massive problem and I'm angry you're not fixing it. What is that problem? Well, the problem is I work for this big employer. Their healthcare options aren't right for me.
Yeah.
Nobody's listening or nobody's aware, to your point.
Yeah.
Nobody's considering the sector or the region or the personality or the person, kind of to my point. Right. Nobody's considering whether or not we could put something else in place. But then more importantly, nobody's saying if we don't fix this, it's not actually about unaffordable healthcare. It's actually about if we don't fix this, what happens when that person loses their job?
Right.
They're oh my God.
Yeah. And
we have to fix that. How dare you?
To take it even another step further, think about the volume, right, of the workforce that is employed on a part-time basis, multiple part-time jobs, or the percentage of individuals, what's the statistic in the next 5 years, 60, 70% are going to be involved in the gig economy in some capacity. So if you're a fractional, employee, or worker, if you're a contractor, if you are part-time and you have multiple jobs, why can't you carry your earned value regardless of where you are or who you work with?
Yeah. And I've made this argument about compliance and regulatory issues, and the fact that a massive employer can absorb the costs that an individual can't. If I'm a freelancer,
that's right.
If I'm doing a startup, well, today the company gets these benefits, tax benefits, and has a regulatory framework in which they're able to provide that to employees. But now I'm on my own. I don't have the means to take on and provide those benefits to myself. So I'm at a severe disadvantage just trying to get something started. That's another great example of pointing out the pain. You're right. We're increasingly going to be freelance. We're increasingly going to be gig economy. It's not what's the solution to that. It's how dare we not fix it? This is a massive problem and somebody needs to do something about
it. And what's interesting, and I think what kind of hits close to home when you talk about the compliance, when you talk about all of these things, nearly all of the platforms that these businesses are running on are systems of record, right? They're transactional by nature.
Sure.
And they capture events that have happened. We learn about things after the fact, after it's become a separation event, after I lost my health care, right? After all of these things happened, it seems to introduce this limitation, right? Running a workforce on these systems tell us only about things after they've already happened.
Well, I'd even push back on you. It doesn't seem to. It unquestionably does.
Mine is a little softer.
No,
but yeah, you're right.
But it's almost. It's. I think one of the problems to push on people, right? If you're a business owner, if you're in a company, if you're an investor, if you're on a board, it is critical that you push the fact that unequivocal fact that what we have today is not really what you'd call business intelligence. What we have today is really analytics and data.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
We have the data points that things took place, and the problem to push on is the fact that there's no reason we don't have intelligence. There's no reason we can't have more.
Right.
We covered what's called predictive analytics quite a few times, right? That predictive analytics recognizes the fact that we can certainly use machine learning. We can use to some extent AI, and we can actually sort of predict behaviors and predict things that companies, business owners, HR tech platforms. I think what we're sort of touching on is what we do today is you're right. In my world, the analogy I've used is hopefully you're all putting in place Google Analytics for your website. Well, Google Analytics is also just a snapshot of what has taken place.
Right.
And you better have it.
Yeah.
You absolutely should have it. If you don't have it, come on, shame on you. Turn it on. It's free. It's free, but think about it. It's free because why is it free? Because the snapshot in time is worth what? Yeah. I mean, it's a helpful record.
Yeah.
But it's not what I actually need. It's not what I actually value. Right. What I want is those analytics to say, here's what's going to happen if
I did this, what can I expect?
Right. And the point is that's absolutely possible.
It's absolutely possible.
And it's emerging. And I think that's why we can come at these solutions in the workforce. Is that we're at the right stage in humanity where we have the research, we have the data, we have past to work with where we can say, this thing is actually possible. Why aren't we doing it more?
Yeah. And to be semantic, machine learning is actually a discipline of AI. So we can definitely use AI.
See, I can't do it. So it's one of those words where I'm like, that machine learning word, it matters.
That's our big bet, I think, Mustard Hub really capturing all of this transactional data, this historical data, and where available, this behavioral signals, right, that exist upstream of these events, right, and turning it into this predictive insight before these things surface as turnover or some missed number in a system of record.
Yeah.
So with your venture lens, in your CMO hat on, like, give me a clear, crisp soundbite of why that upstream layer, why that's where the value sits, why having infrastructure so that platforms can surface this upstream layer is the most. You just said it yourself about Google Analytics, right? It's free. Why? Because it's a snapshot of things that have already happened. So why does the value sit at the upstream layer? And why is it so hard for these transactional platforms to even do it themselves? I mean, that part to me is a little obvious. I mean, retrofitting is
all right. The kind of the summary is, let me stick with the web example because that's my world. That something like WordPress or Squarespace. A lot of small businesses you're using Squarespace or Wix, right, to get something off the ground.
Are those still up?
Are they actually still around? I think so.
Maybe they are.
I think so. Those are also nearly free. Why? Because it's enabling you to put something in place that is a snapshot of what you're doing right now. Right. I'm simplifying, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. And then we talked about CRMs, right? Yeah. And everybody wants a CRM. HubSpot is also essentially free, unless you need a massive version of HubSpot. It's essentially free. Well, Salesforce is having this conversation about infrastructure too. Infrastructure as a service, because I love how Salesforce actually kind of realized, no, the real value in a CRM, a customer database, is not the CRM itself, which is the snapshot, but it's where those two might exist together, right? Why isn't there infrastructure about customers that actually exists in my website infrastructure? That in my WordPress, that
Right.
all these visitors, all these people are on my website. They're calling me from there. They're filling out my forms. This infrastructure concept is taking the old world of a static CRM and putting it in the platforms and the tools that you all need and you use as this layer in between that says, no, in fact, all of this data should be in what you use in a more meaningful way, right?
Yeah.
That's infrastructure, and it's not hard to do. And and your point about machine learning and being able to measure the behavior of people, that's the same analogy is point of fact about HR tech. Right? That's why I'm excited in writing about what we've been doing and what others in the industry are doing. The same fact is true that yes, I need an HR management solution. I need a human capital management platform for my company. Yes, I do. That's like WordPress, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
data set that I need to have to manage what I've got going on. But then at the same time, I've got a hiring platform and I've got an applicant tracking platform, and that's all
Yeah.
those upstream other data sets, and they're just data sets.
That's all.
And why isn't all of that data, in fact, available in what I actually use to keep an eye on whether or not my employees are happy and to help them?
Yeah.
And you can. It's the same concept. You put the infrastructure in
Right.
place in between them
To stitch it together.
that stitches it together and spits in the machine learning or the AI,
Right.
right? Spits in that actual intelligence, not data,
Right.
that helps a business, helps a company understand whether or not they are hiring the right people. To get back to where we started the conversation, whether or not they are doing the right things for their people.
I'll take it a step further, and I think that what happens is when you have, even when you have smaller, not necessarily even smaller, actually, any platform in HR adjacent world, or even vertical SaaS, and you're taking your data, as much data as you have that might be, siloed in countless modules that you have between learning and development, or scheduling, time and attendance, demographics and tenure, any of these things, you're still, no matter how big your platform is, you're still working with a limited data set that's only specific to your platform
Sure.
and your customers. And there's no cross network data lakes that help you actually calibrate your models to real workforce realities, not just the weaknesses that you might have on your system, which then become amplified if that's the only data set you're working with.
For sure. But besides which, what was going through my brain though is still the kind of the it with your customer data though. You don't just go build that.
Right.
Well,
Right.
there's a company that already does it exceptionally
That's right.
well. Like
Yes.
it's similar in that
Yes,
sense
yes, yes.
that you're right. If you're going to create a data lake that connects all of the different human resource related things you use, it doesn't make any sense for any one of those things or you to go and build it, because people are already building it. People are already making those connections. They're already providing the
That's right.
behavioral intelligence. They're already providing other forms of insight that tie it all together to give you that.
Right.
And it should just be plugged in.
And those platforms should be focusing on their core business and doing what they do exceptionally well, rather than having to take their entire engineering team, their eyes off the ball, and start doing something else where they don't necessarily have, the expertise or frankly the bandwidth, because they need to deal with the pants on fire thing that's happening right now for their customers, and not this other piece of infrastructure, like you said, that already exists.
Yeah.
So you think about capital, you think about ecosystems for a living. This is what you do. Where's the smart money going in workforce and people technology right? Tell the startup founders, tell the business owners where this is all headed. And I'll add as a qualifier to this, as more of this work gets sort of mediated by software and AI. what do you think becomes more important about how leaders are treating the humans on?
Well, actually, your last question was going to be my number 3 about where the capital is going. So maybe that's part of the answer. So where's the capital, or where's the enthusiasm and attention going in workforce in general? Number one, it's right people, right place, hands down. Right, start at the top. The number of people you see ranting about how the job board is ridiculous, or job listings are fake, and I have to upload my resume and fill out your form and do an interview and do a video, and it's just astounding, and it's all trying to solve what we talked about a little bit: are the right people in the right places. And we know it's not skill,
Yeah,
or role or experience, it's something else. So that's a huge space that everyone wants to support, because we know that people aren't generally in the right places. Solves a whole host of problems. Um, number two, it seems to be. I'm going to use this word, but I'm not sure it's the appropriate word for everyone to appreciate, because I don't literally mean it in this context. But it seems to sort of be education and training, right? It's the workforce development point that I was making, that part of workforce development is, how do we fix community college? Are we teaching the right things? We know that we don't know what public school curriculum should be. I don't think anybody can genuinely fairly say that, but we know it's not the best it can be. We know it's missing a lot of things, right? So it's can we everyone is investing in changing education in any number of different ways to ensure that people are in the workforce in the most meaningful way. That's certainly number two. And then number three is to your last question, coincidentally. It's pushing into all of this appreciation of the fact that there's a ton of psychological research. We have the ability to do predictive analytics. We have personality assessments that we know work. Yeah. Right? We have all of this it's still data. We have all of this data that says we know how to better care for employees. We know that job satisfaction is low. We know that it's not all about compensation. It's about a whole bunch of other different considerations. We know these things. And so I think it's pushing into any sort of, it's a word we've used with Mustard Hub, any sort of behavioral workforce intelligence, right? Which I think isn't explicitly intelligence about your workforce. It's intelligence about workforce behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Any insight that we can get into how we can improve the environment of working. We know we need to. We know we have the data about it. We know we have better direction. So it's kind of like the education context. We know it's not right. We know we can do it. We know we have data about what's better. and so that's the third point. So there's a lot of investment. There's a lot of demand for anybody who's fixing that, who's addressing it, who's putting in intelligence in place, who's putting infrastructure in place to enable small business, even startups, small businesses, companies, and the full stack, HR tech, recruiting processes, to be much more meaningful than just applying data upon which then they have to make decisions. It's do it better. We know we can.
I love it. So I want you to wrap us up. A leader comes to you, a startup founder comes to you, city official, right?
Sure.
Or some regional or state elected official comes to you and says, I want to build a workforce. I want to build a workplace that can actually see people clearly before things break. I want to act before something happens. What's that single most important piece of advice? You're on an elevator with them. You have a second right before you get to the top floor and the doors open and they walk right out of there. What is it that you tell them?
I am, I have a reputation for this amongst in the startup ecosystem, in the startup community. And in fact, if you read my book, and I would love you to do, if you read my book, I already have people getting about halfway through my book saying the answer, getting about halfway through my book and saying, man, you just seem to criticize everything. I'm like, yeah, finish the book. Trust me, I get there. I'm setting the stage. In an elevator. I mean, the answer is in an elevator. Think of all the things we talked about. Healthcare is not great. Workforce is not perfect. Jobs are changing. We don't quite know how. Education is. The answer that I almost always give people is, in fact, right off the bat, you're wrong. You're wrong. Here's what we're doing. You're wrong. Only to get them to go, wait, what? No, let me explain what we're doing. No, I know you're wrong. I know what you're doing is wrong. In fact, that's why you called me. That's why you're asking me, because what you're doing is wrong. And it's just to frankly kind of do what I did in the book, which is we know there are better ways. We know there are better solutions. We don't always know the right answer, but we know it's not as good as it could be. We know it's not working as well as it could be. And so it's with a lawmaker, with a city, with a startup, with a company, it's always hang on, stop. What you're doing is not working.
Yeah.
Just to make them go, what do you mean? and then my second favorite word is why, right? They'll explain themselves, they'll explain what they're doing, and I'll just say, why? Okay, why? Why? And that touches on what's called first principles thinking, where you get down to the what are we actually doing and why?
Yeah.
And you just keep drilling in on that. And it enables us to then say, well, why aren't you?
Yeah.
This thing is right here that would solve that problem.
Yeah.
Put that in place. So you're wrong.
Thank you.
Why? And here's what actually works better, right? Not necessarily right. Here's what works better. Why on earth? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you using that?
Yeah. Which you could definitely wrap up in about 60 seconds in an elevator. You're wrong. Why? And why aren't you doing this? Tell everybody where they can find the book.
Amazon is the easiest place. I think it's also on Goodreads. I'm not sure if it's on Barnes & Noble yet, but it should be. So Amazon for sure. And if you look up Startup Ecosystems, maybe throw my name on there, Paul O'Brien, because there are a couple books with a similar name. That's a good way to find it. I also have a very long running website and newsletter at seobrien.com. And so if you want to hit that too, Startup Economist, seobrien.com. You can find the book there, but you can find a ton of other content. I get into infrastructure and startups and ecosystems, obviously.
Very cool.
And love covering things. So if anybody wants to chat or cover something with me, I'd love to hear from you and do that.
Awesome. 5 stars on Amazon. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you for joining me. And, not just because you're helping build the thing. Big thanks to all you watching and listening to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Please visit mustardhub.com to learn more about what we do and discover how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. Until next time.